I want to thank our panelists today, Jared from TCC Group, Chung-Wha from Immigration Coalition, and Gonzalo from the Coalición de Inmigrantes, or the Centro de Imigrantes. So thank you very much for being here. What we're going to be doing is Jared is going to present a report, a study that he created for TCC Group, and give us a summary presentation about specifically coalitions and networks. And then we'll move forward to Chung-Wha and Gonzalo, and I will just explain later what their role will be.
I'm asked to do the part of the presentation that everyone feels like they need to needfully suffer through, which is sort of the theoretical framework, which then sets the stage to hear sort of from people on the ground doing the really important hard work of working in partnership, creating coalitions and networks. How I came to this topic is I have a background in organizational change management and what fascinates me is how organizations work, how they function, how you put them together. And I was doing a lot of work evaluating policy and advocacy work. How do you make change in the advocacy arena? And this thing that just kept coming up over and over again was, well, you need a network, you need a coalition in order to be effective in that arena. And then I started, and that resonated with all the folks on the more program implementation side who kept being pushed to collaborate more, do more in terms of joint programming and that sort of thing. And I started saying, well, to myself, there's something here. It's not very well defined. And so just did a little experiment. How many of you have ever, in your professional career, participated in a collaborative arrangement? Okay. How many of you have ever participated in a partnership? How many of you have ever participated in a coalition? How many of you have ever participated in a formal network? How many of you have participated in an informal network? How many have sat there and said, what's the difference between what he's talking about? That was the question that I had, was there's all these terms being thrown around, and I'm thinking, is there really anything different about these things? And if there is a difference, are they meaningful differences? And so I started really doing a lot of work, both in terms of evaluating coalitions and networks on the ground, actual things, and as well as reviewing the academic literature from a wide variety of disciplines to try and understand what underlies this concept of collaborations and networks. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And so let's first say, what did I find out? Is there an actual difference? And the answer is, sort of. When we talk about what I will frequently refer to as interorganizational relationships, or IORs, there's basically two continua along which we're examining how they function. One continuum is the accountability continuum, which is how much accountability is inherent in the structure. So if you're mandated to do a certain set of things, that would be high accountability. If you can do whatever you want in the structure, in the relationship, then that would be very low accountability. The other continuum is the formality of the arrangement. On the one hand, you have very informal arrangements, which are people, just more coming together, not a lot of structure involved, to very formal arrangements. And when you plot along these two axes, different types of relationships, you begin to see this order that goes from this bottom quadrant, which is very informal, very separate accountability, which is where we have things like informal networks, committees, formal networks, and right in the middle you finally hit coalitions. And then you start moving up into the upper quadrant, where you start getting into more formal types of arrangements, collaborations, strategic alliances, joint ventures, and then finally the ultimate form of an interorganizational relationship is that the relationships become one and the same through merger. So these topics that can be very conflated. There are some meaningful differences, but at the end of the day, it can be very fluid, and the continuum can sort of slide back and forth, and at one moment you might be in a really tight collaborative arrangement, and then you finish a project and you might slide back into more of an informal network, and you can sort of go back and forth along this continuum. So, is it important what you call it? The answer is no, not necessarily. What is important is that everyone who's involved is using the same kind of language and has the same type of understanding about what it is that you're in together. So if you've got one group that thinks that there's high levels of accountability, and you've got another group that thinks they can do whatever they want, and that other group goes out and they start talking in the media, and they say something controversial, and that other group who might be highly risk averse is tied to them, that's a huge problem, right? So the main thing that you want, the main thing is to ensure that everyone is on the same page about where they are in relationship to these various continuums.